dialogue and diplomacy.
While addressing a UNSC discussion, Indian envoy to the UN R. Ravindra also thanked nations which helped India evacuate its citizens from Ukraine.
India undertook intensive and immediate steps to evacuate its nationals. Till date, about 22,500 Indians have returned home safely. We are grateful to all our partners for their support in our evacuation efforts.
Till date, about 22,500 Indians have returned home safely. Ravindra also said that India has been in touch with both the Russian Federation and Ukraine in this regard and will continue to remain engaged.
India has been in touch with both the Russian Federation and Ukraine in this regard and will continue to remain engaged. We continue to underline the need to respect the UN Charter, international law, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states.
He reiterated India's stand on peace process, adding that any lasting resolution of the conflict can only be achieved peacefully through diplomatic negotiations. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
Satellite images show the extent of destructions in Mariupol, Irpin and Snake Island. Ukraine's military has said that it repelled an attempt to take control of Mariupol by Russian forces who were forced to retreat. Satellite images, of course, by Maxar Technologies show fires burning across the city, with many high-rise apartment buildings heavily damaged or destroyed. Now, Mariupol, of course, continues to remain one of the places where the Russians have been trying to gain control. We have had reports from the Ukrainians that they have managed to hold strong so far. But even as this happens, of course, we have seen the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky updating the status of negotiations with Russia in his latest address, saying that the latest talks went pretty well and will continue today as well. So hope of those talks bearing fruit finally. Second largest city of Kharkiv, a public building has been hit in one such a strike. But even as Russia, of course, continues to bombard all these public buildings as well as residential areas, nearly all the Russian military offensive remains stalled after making little progress over the past few days. This, of course, according to a senior U.S. Official, as the U.S. continues to track the movement of Russian forces. Now, there have been sustained attacks on various big cities in Ukraine, including, of course, Kharkiv as well as Mariupol and Kiev. The convoy outside Kiev also remains stalled.
Вот где-то вот там во дворе за вот этим вот домом что-то бахнуло. Самое страшное, что где-то в той стороне мой дом.
Now, as Russia continues its bombardment of various cities in Ukraine, residential buildings appear to have been shelled in Kharkiv as well by Russian forces. However, Moscow has continued to maintain that Russian troops aren't targeting residential areas. Now, this comes at the back of the fourth round of negotiations that were held between the Russian and the Ukrainian representatives. Today, there has been no movement forward. However, there has been a lot of positive news that's coming in from both sides, saying that the last round of talks seem to be quite fruitful. Now, when negotiations, of course, resume today, there will be a hope that perhaps there could at least be a ceasefire in place. Visuals on your screen right now coming to you, of course, from Kharkiv, where residential buildings continue to be targeted by strikes. Now, as the war enters day 20, the heavy fighting between Russian troops and Ukrainian forces continues. The tail of the missile .2 fell a dozen meters from a government house of the Donetsk Republican Library. Russian troops stuffed Volnovakha with a cache of weapons and ammunition. Several hospitals and public infrastructure have been destroyed in Ukraine-Russia conflict in the separatist-controlled town in the Donetsk region. In yet another video that has surfaced from the Donbas region, Ukrainian tanks can be seen being seized in Donbas. The rebel region has been at the center of the war with Russia, declaring it as an independent nation just before its military offensive in Ukraine. In the latest video released by the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, Ukrainian troops can be seen destroying a Russian armored personal carrier, Typhoon, 2 armored fighting vehicles, Lexus, and 17 special forces in Mariupol, further adding that the fight for Ukrainian Mariupol continues despite the fact that the city is under siege. Airstrikes have hit a 9-story residential building in Kiev's Obolon region on Monday, and these visuals show the aftermath of these strikes on residential areas. This comes as Russian troops continue their advance towards the country's capital of Kiev. As part of military advancements, Russian troops have severely struck Obolon, a residential district in Kiev. Ukraine, of course, continues to report extensive damage to its public properties as well as residential areas. Visuals are coming to us over this bombing that took place at the Lavina Mall in Ukraine's capital city of Kiev after sustained and continuous attacks by Russia through the night. Now, this video, of course, documents the kind of damage that residential areas as well as public buildings have been facing in the as the offensive by Russia continues. It is day 20 of the fighting in Ukraine, and Russian forces continue to bombard various parts. Azov forces, together with the armed forces of Ukraine, destroyed Russian military equipment near Kiev. Azov is the far-right all-volunteer infantry military group whose members, which are estimated to be over thousands, are ultra-nationalists and accused of harboring neo-Nazi and white supremacist ideology. As Russia continues to pound attack on one Ukrainian city after another, Saltovaka in Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine, came under attack. A Russian airstrike hit the region, and these visuals show us the destruction that ensued. Ukrainian armed forces shot down a Russian missile in Ukraine's Kharkiv. Kharkiv has been under constant attack by Russian forces, which has caused massive devastation, further leading to grave humanitarian crisis. In yet another video that has surfaced, rocket artillery of Ukraine's 128th Transcarpathian Brigade can be seen attacking a Russian post. The Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation has released a new video. The Russian military using high-precision weapons to destroy the APU's multiple rocket launchers can be seen. In Velika, Russian army shelled a bus stop, causing massive destruction in the residential area. Velika Dimarka is an urban-type settlement in the Brovary area of Kiev.
There have been camps like this that have been set up for these people. Hundreds of people have lined up. These are the people who have come from Ukraine, leaving their homes behind. And around 20 lakh such people have already left Ukraine. They are carrying their little babies. They are standing in long queues because they want to get themselves registered for visas and other documents. So they are all waiting for the war to end.
Now, residential buildings shelled in Kharkiv by Russian forces. However, Moscow, of course, continues to maintain that it is not targeting residential areas. Now, we have seen shots of bombardment coming in, and we are now also getting information that seemed to suggest that there have been air raid signals that went up in the capital, Kiev. And reports also suggest that there have been 2 large explosions in Kiev. Now, nearly all of the Russian military offensive, of course, remains stalled. They have not been able to take any of the major cities of Ukraine yet. They continue to encircle Kiev as well as Kharkiv. The evacuation convoy of about 160 cars, of course, managed to leave Mariupol yesterday. There were at least two large explosions that have been reported short while ago in Kiev's western district. What we also know is that negotiations between the Russian and the Ukrainian representatives will resume after the fourth round of talks ended actually without a breakthrough. Now, Russia is continuing its bombardment of many Ukrainian cities with reports of the kind of damage that you see on your screens coming in.
What I will say is that we are watching very closely the extent to which the PRC, or any other country for that matter, provides any form of support, whether that's material support, whether that's economic support, whether that's financial support, to Russia. Any such support from anywhere in the world would be of great concern to us. It would be of course, the greatest concern if a country like the PRC were to be doing that. A country that, by the way, has tremendous leverage with Russia, has a relationship with Russia that is distinct from the relationship that we or just about any other country on the planet has with Russia. We have communicated very clearly to Beijing that we won't stand by if we will not allow any country to compensate Russia for its losses.
Russian arms in Volnovakha, the biggest news break right now. Visuals on your screen of Russian troops stuffing Volnovakha with caches of weapons and ammunition. Several hospitals and public infrastructure have been destroyed during the Ukraine-Russia conflict in the separatist-controlled town of Volnovakha in the Donetsk region. And now Russian troops are sending weapons and ammunition to Volnovakha as the intense fighting continues. You can see the Russian arms there in Volnovakha. They are preparing for a mega showdown with the Ukrainian troops, weapons and ammunition en route to that area. We have already seen several hospitals and public infrastructure already being destroyed as part of the conflict, which has lasted 20 days now. Remember, this is a separatist-controlled town, Volnovakha, in the Donetsk region. Getting you visuals now of Ukrainian tanks being seized in the Donbas area. Remember, Russia has accused Ukraine of human rights violations in the Donbas region. The rebel-held region has been at the center of the war, with Russia declaring it as an independent nation just before its military offensive in Ukraine. Visuals on your screen of the tanks being towed away. Visuals of Ukrainian tanks being seized in Donbas region. Now remember, both the areas, that's Luhansk and Donetsk, which are part of the Donbas region, have been declared as independent and been recognized as separate republics by Russia. We had seen intense fighting still continuing there in those rebel-held regions. Now we're looking at the tide changing, with Russia seizing the Ukrainian tanks there. The Kremlin has rejected recent assertions by the EU and US officials that Russian President Vladimir Putin is frustrated and that his forces are not making progress in Ukraine. Kremlin spokesperson has said that at the start of the military operation, Putin had ordered Russian forces to refrain from immediate storming of large cities, including the capital of Kiev. Ukrainian emergency services reported at least one person died and 6 others injured after an airstrike hit downtown Kiev. The airstrike, which destroyed a tram carriage and vehicle, hit a street next to a Ukrainian checkpoint. It was unclear if the checkpoint was the target of the attack and what missile was used. A video posted by Ukraine's Azov battalion on social media showed a powerful explosion destroying a high-rise building in the southern eastern city of Mariupol. The drone footage shared by Special Forces Unit includes members of a far-right political group, showed fires blazing and thick, dark plumes of smoke rising from several buildings in the port city. Russia's defense ministry has released a video which it said showed Ukrainian armored vehicles and weapons being handed over to separated forces from the eastern Donbas region. The video showed a range of armored vehicles and fighters being briefed. The ministry said that the weaponry had been captured from Ukrainian nationalist battalions and territorial defense battalions. A Ukrainian lawmaker reiterated calls for the international community to provide Ukraine with air defense systems to help counter Russia's invasion. Alex Goncharenko, a member of Ukraine's parliament, was speaking in Kiev shortly after an airstrike in the capital. Goncharenko, who also is a civil guard, said that residents were determined to prevent Russians from capturing their cities.
We need the withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Ukraine. This is very important. We need a strict security guarantees for Ukraine in order such terrible war not happen against my country in future. We do not want assurances. We need a strict, severe, hard security guarantees for my country.
The Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine has claimed that troops have destroyed 4 Russian armored personnel carriers, Typhoon 2 armored fighting vehicles, Lynxes, and 17 special forces in Mariupol. Ukraine has said that fighting for Ukraine in Mariupol continues despite the fact that the city is under siege. Ukraine's forces continue to fight for every inch of the land. Russian artillery being destroyed in Mariupol. Visuals on your screens. Tracking for you the latest from Ukraine. You can see the video being put out by the Ministry of Internal Affairs of Ukraine, claiming that the Ukrainian troops have destroyed 4 Russian armored personnel carriers, 2 armored fighting vehicles, and 17 special forces in Mariupol as the battle rages on for the capture of the city. Getting you visuals now of a 9-story residential building after Russian shelling in Kiev's Oblon region. Russian troops continue their advance towards the country's capital of Kiev, and as part of their military advancements, they have severely struck Oblon, a residential district in Kiev Oblast. You can see the aftermath of the Russian shelling of that 9-story residential building, which was targeted by Russia. It's located in Kiev's Oblon region. Russian troops continue their advance towards the capital of Kiev. Now remember, for the last couple of days, Russia has been advancing towards Kiev. However, the pace has been slow. They have been destroying many buildings in its wakes. One such building on your screens is a 9-story building being hit by Russian airstrikes in the Oblon region. Now this is as part of Russia's military advancements that they have severely struck Oblon, a residential district in Kiev Oblast. You're watching Republic TV. I'm Crispino Nunes. Now, our top focus is the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and the conflict takes a U-turn as this time after Ukrainian forces fired a ballistic missile Tochka-U in Donetsk region. Russia has accused Ukraine of war crimes. Take a look at this report.
The Russia-Ukraine conflict has entered its 3rd week. Ukrainian defenders knocked out a T-80 Russian tank at the nuclear power plant facility. Russia has accused Ukraine of war crimes for firing a missile that killed 20 people in the city of Donetsk in eastern Ukraine, which is under the control of Russia-backed separatists. The allegations come after Ukraine recently declared that it will take to the offensive against Russia.
Сегодня, 14 марта, около 11 часов 30 минут московского времени, с территории подконтрольной киевскому националистическому режиму был осуществлен удар тактической ракетой «У» по жилому кварталу города Донецка. Обстрел города произведен с северо-западного направления, из района населенного пункта Красноармейск, который контролируется украинскими националистическими подразделениями. В результате подрыва кассетной боевой части в центре Донецка погибло 20 мирных жителей. Еще 28 человек, в том числе дети, получили тяжелые ранения и доставлены в медицинские учреждения. Применение такого оружия по городу, где нет никаких огневых позиций вооруженных сил, то есть заведомо по мирному населению, является военным преступлением.
The Russian Defense Ministry said that the projectile was a tactical missile. He said the green light to employ such a missile would have come from a high-ranking commanding officers in Kiev, allegedly implicating the Ukrainian authorities in the attack.
Обращаю внимание, что решение на применение такого типа ракетного вооружения принимает как минимум командование украинской группировкой войск после утверждения руководством Вооруженных сил Украины в Киеве. Все это еще раз подтверждает нацистскую и античеловеческую суть правящего сегодня режима на Украине.
Meanwhile, a chilling CCTV footage from Donetsk shows how civilians were the victims of one of many shellings. It is unclear whether the attack was from the Russian side or the Ukrainian side. Another video appears to confirm eyewitness testimony that the missile fell onto Donetsk's Shevchenko Boulevard, where its fragmentation mechanism went off and sending lethal ballistic splinters in all directions, claiming scores of civilians' lives. Agency report, Republic TV.
Azov forces, together with the armed forces of Ukraine, destroyed Russian military equipment near Kiev. Azov is a far-right all-volunteer infantry military group whose members, were estimated to be over thousands, are ultra-nationalists and accused of harboring neo-Nazis and white supremacist ideology. You can see the visuals on your screen of the Russian equipment being destroyed near Kiev. That's the visuals that came to you right now. Now remember, the Azov forces, together with the armed forces of Ukraine, destroyed the Russian military equipment near Kiev. Today is day 20 of the Russian invasion, and now the Azov forces, along with the Ukrainian armed forces, have destroyed the Russian military equipment near Kiev. Remember, Azov is a far-right infantry group. That's the latest information that we're getting to you right now of the equipment of Russian armed forces being destroyed near Kiev right now. Now, Ukraine's Ministry of Defense has said that Russia is paying a high price for each advance it makes. According to the Ministry of Defense, it has been issuing daily intelligence briefings to the public to counter Kremlin disinformation surrounding the invasion in Ukraine.
The Ukrainian Defense Ministry has claimed that some Russian soldiers in Belgorod have refused to fight in the ongoing invasion. The ministry stated that the enemy's morale and psychological state remains at a low level, leading to the Russian armed forces' refusal to obey command orders. The ministry further claimed that the Ukrainian armed forces have carried out deadly strikes on the rare infrastructure in order to destroy Russia's logistics system in the temporarily occupied regions of Ukraine. Meanwhile, attacking Russia, he said the only success Russia has achieved in Ukraine is killing civilians.
Російська Федерація, те, що вона сьогодні називає успіхом в себе, успіхи в них з їхньої точки зору лише в тому, що вони знищують мирне населення. Переважно це жінки і чоловіки. Те, що вони там, неважливо по Києву чи іншому місту.
He confirmed that the blast that took place in Ukrainian capital on Monday afternoon was caused by a missile which Ukrainian air defense systems shot down.
Все можливе збивають, але розумієте, кількість випущених ракет по, як ми бачили там буквально вчора, здається, по одному населеному пункту можуть бути десятки. От. І наша система ПВО, я вважаю, що це герої.
The fighting between Ukraine and Russian forces intensified on the 20th day, with the fourth round of talks between two countries ending without a breakthrough. Agency report, Republic TV.
Getting you latest visual stuff from Saltovka in Kharkiv, which is the second largest city in Ukraine. A Russian airstrike has hit the region, and these visuals show the destruction it has caused in the particular region. Now, these are the latest visuals from Saltovka in Kharkiv, which has suffered a major airstrike by Russia. The shelling still continuing there. The aftermath of the Russian airstrike, you can see the visuals on your screen, and this is Saltovka region. In Kharkiv. Kharkiv has been witnessing much of the barrage of shells being dropped by Russia. Airstrikes still continuing in that region. Russian airstrikes hitting residential areas and buildings, hospitals and schools. Visuals here of the aftermath of the airstrikes in Kharkiv. And this is the region called Saltovka in Kharkiv, where you can see the residential areas being reduced to rubble. The visuals on your screen, the aftermath of the Russian airstrike in Saltovka. That's the latest news that we're getting to you right now. Visuals on your screen of the amount of destruction the Russian airstrikes that has caused in this particular region of Saltovka in Kharkiv in Ukraine as the war continues in that particular region. Intense fighting still continuing in Saltovka in Ukraine. That's the latest that we're getting to you right now. Moving on now, the West remains divided over supplying arms and ammunition to Ukraine as Russian invasion enters day 20. Take a look at this report.
The situation around military aid to Ukraine has gotten more complicated even as the West has assured of support. Poland has said that any decision on giving fighter jets to Ukraine would be a joint NATO decision.
I'm in touch with our American counterparts, with our NATO and European Union counterparts, and of course with the Ukrainian ones. As far as your question is concerned, I can only say that this kind of decision has to be made by the NATO alliance as a whole, but not one member state, because the impact of this kind of decision is going to affect the alliance as a whole. So there is no one single NATO member who could make this decision for the rest of the alliance.
The US Defense Department has so far rejected an offer from Poland to transfer the Soviet-era mix to Ukraine. Poland's statement followed just hours after Hungary reportedly declared that it will not directly supply weapons aid to Ukraine.
We are ready to host a considerable number of our Ukrainian neighbors who are in need, but certainly no country can do anything like that on its own.
Meanwhile, Germany on Monday announced that it will stop publicly informing about details of supply of weapons to Ukraine for security reasons. This after Russia on March 12 reportedly threatened to target foreign military aid convoys to Ukraine. Russia has warned NATO and the West at large of being involved in the war, saying that the same would lead to huge consequences. Agency report, Republic TV.
The position is very simple. Ukrainian Donbas and Ukrainian Crimea are Ukrainian territories, and we will not give away a single inch of Ukrainian territory. Only if we have this complex of security guarantees, we can think about possible status of the country, be it neutral or non-bloc or anything else.
Starting with the breaking updates coming in as far as the Ukraine border crisis is concerned. The visuals on your screens right now are from Kharkiv region, which is indeed the second largest city of Ukraine. And the visuals on your screen show how the Ukrainian armed forces shot down a Russian missile in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. Remember, Kharkiv has been under constant attack by Russian forces, which has caused massive devastation, which also led to a grave humanitarian crisis as well. The visuals on your screens of how the Ukrainians have been giving a very tough fight to the Russian army, in which the visuals in which you can see how a Russian missile has been shot down by the Ukrainian troops. You just heard the visuals, you just heard the sound as well of how the Ukraine army has launched a rocket attack on the Russians. The Ukraine army giving a very tough fight to the Russians there. A rocket missile being launched by the Ukraine army on the Russians. Now, even though Russia has military supremacy over Ukraine, Ukraine continues to give a very strong fight to the Russians, and the missile they're being launched by the Ukraine army on the Russians. This, of course, comes as the Russian invasion against Ukraine enters day 20. And just yesterday, in fact, another round of talks were held between Russia and Ukraine, in which a lot of issues were taken up. We yet to see how that transpires. But on the ground, the missiles and airstrikes and bombardments continue across Ukraine. And the latest visuals on your screens right now of the Ukraine army launching rocket attack on the Russians. Now, India has called for direct negotiations between Ukraine and Russia to end hostilities, while stressing the need to respect international law, sovereignty and territorial integrity of states at the United Nations Security Council. Here's a full report.
With no resolution in sight to both the political war between Moscow and Kiev and the war in Ukraine, India at UNSC on Monday said it has been consistent in calling for an immediate end to all hostilities.
India has been consistent in calling for an immediate end to all hostilities in Ukraine. Our Prime Minister has repeatedly called for an urgent ceasefire and that there is no other path left but of dialogue and diplomacy.
While addressing a UNSC discussion, Indian envoy to the UN, R. Ravindra, also thanked nations which helped India evacuate its citizens from Ukraine.
India undertook intensive and immediate steps to evacuate its nationals. Till date, about 22,500 Indians have returned home safely. We are grateful to all our partners for their support in our evacuation efforts.
Till date, about 22,500 Indians have returned home safely. Ravindra also said that India has been in touch with both the Russian Federation and Ukraine in this regard and will continue to remain engaged.
India has been in touch with both the Russian Federation and Ukraine in this regard and will continue to remain engaged. We continue to underline the need to respect the UN Charter, international law, and the sovereignty and territorial integrity of states.
He reiterated India's stand on peace process, adding that any lasting resolution of the conflict can only be achieved peacefully through diplomatic negotiations. Bureau Report, Republic TV.
We continue to get you all the latest visuals from Ukraine. In fact, those are the visuals we're getting right now from the Avdiivka city of Ukraine, which shows the aftermath of Russian shelling. You can see the house which is on fire there in the Avdiivka area of Ukraine. Now remember, what Russia has been maintaining is that The Russian bases is the only point where the Russians have been attacking, but residential complexes have been attacked time and again. And the visuals there, you can see how the Russians have set the house on fire as a result of the missile strike on this particular area in Ukraine. In fact, what is also being told is that there was massive shelling by the Russian troops at the Advika coke plant on Monday itself, which is one of the largest coke producing assets in Europe. And more visuals we are getting right now of the Advika region in Ukraine, where a residential house has been hit as a result of shelling by the Russian troops. And a quick wrap of all that's happening on the Ukraine border crisis. The Kremlin has rejected recent assertions by the European Union and the US officials that the Russian President Vladimir Putin is frustrated that his forces are not making progress in Ukraine. The Kremlin spokesperson said that the start of the military operation, Putin had ordered Russian forces to refrain from immediate storming of large cities, including the capital, Kiev. Ukrainian emergency services reported at least one person died and 6 others were injured after an airstrike hit downtown Kiev. The airstrike, which destroyed a tram carriage and a vehicle, hit a street next to a Ukrainian checkpost. It was unclear if the checkpoint was a target of the attack and what missile was used. Video posted by the Ukraine's Azov battalion on social media showed a powerful explosion destroying a high-rise building in the southeastern city of Mariupol. The drone footage shared by Special Forces Unit includes members of far-right political groups, showed fires blazing and thick, dark plumes of smoke rising from several buildings in the port city. Russian Defense Ministry on Monday released a video which showed Ukrainian armored vehicles and weapons being handed over to separatist forces from the eastern Donbass region. The video showed a range of armored vehicles and fighters being briefed as well. The ministry said that the weaponry has been captured from Ukrainian nationalist battalions and territorial defense battalions. A Ukrainian lawmaker reiterated calls for international community to provide Ukraine with air defense systems to help counter Russia's invasion. Alex Goncherko, who is a member of Ukraine's parliament, was speaking in Kiev shortly after an airstrike in the capital. He said that, in fact, Goncherko, who is also in the civil guard, said residents were determined to prevent the Russians from capturing the city.
What you see behind me is the Ukrainian police, which is basically manning this entire area. What I'm showing you right now are the latest images of the very place where the bombing took place. With regards to Kiev, there hasn't been any offensives that have been conducted by the Russians. They're trying to ensure that in the days to come, when that battle, the battle that takes place in Kiev, they are in a position to defend Kiev.
And those are the visuals we are getting right now of the Russian army destroying multiple rocket launchers of the Ukraine army. You can see how the Russian army has been constantly bombarding the Ukrainian regions, and there you have the Russian army again destroying multiple rocket launchers of the Ukraine army. This comes as the Russian invasion in Ukraine enters day 20. It's been 3 weeks now that Russia continues with its offensive against Ukraine. 4 rounds of talks have been held so far, but nothing has transpired as far as a resolution is concerned between the two countries. And those are the visuals we are getting right now of the Russian army destroying multiple rocket launchers of the Ukraine army. Now, visuals of destruction have also been pouring in from several cities of Ukraine. Of these, many cities are among Ukraine's largest, which suffered heavy losses as the conflict enters its 3rd week. Let's take a look at this report, which shows how the cities in Ukraine have been completely devastated as a result of Russia's invasion.
A pregnant woman and her baby lost their life after Russia bombed the maternity ward of a hospital where she was meant to give birth in Mariupol.
Роддом. До нас привезли трьох. Одна найтяжча була з розчавленням тазу і відривом правого стегна в шоці. Поки її реанімували, проводили протишокові мероприємства, ми зробили кесаревий розтин, дістали дитину без ознак життя. Протягом більше півгодини реанімація дитини не дала результатів, потім ще.
Videos and images of the woman being rushed to an ambulance on a stretcher had gone viral, showing the world the horrors of the war in Ukraine. The emergency services stated that information on casualties was still being clarified after a 4-story residential building was destroyed in Kharkiv in an airstrike. Ukrainian emergency services reported that at least one person died and 6 others were injured in an airstrike in downtown Kiev.
Я була в квартирі з ребенком. Ребенок виконував завдання онлайн. І дуже сильно бахнуло. У дитини почалася істерика. В нас посипалося скло на балконі. Посипалася штукатурка. І це було дуже страшно. У дитини почалася істерика. Він почав кричати. Ми його схопили і побігли до дверей в коридорі, щоб бігти в бомбосховище.
The airstrike destroyed a tram carriage and vehicle and hit a street next to a Ukrainian checkpoint. The Russian forces reportedly fired an artillery shell at a 9-story apartment building in the Obolonsky district of northern Kiev, destroying apartments on several floors and igniting a massive fire. This visual from near Kiev shows how a shell hit Kurenivka. As the Russia-Ukraine war continues, thousands of people flocked to the streets of the Nova Kakhovka district of Ukraine's Kherson region to protest against the Russian forces.
Ukraine is on fire. The country is being decimated before the eyes of the world. The impact on civilians is reaching terrifying proportions. Countless innocent people, including women and children, have been killed. After being hit by Russian forces, roads, airports and schools lie in ruins. According to the World Health Organization, at least 24 health facilities have suffered attacks.
Millions of Ukrainians have fled their homes, with more than 2.8 million crossing into Poland and other neighboring countries in what the UN has called Europe's biggest refugee crisis since World War II. Agency report, Republic TV.
By the Russian troops. Now, this is a bus stop that has been shelled by the Russian troops as the invasion now enters day 20, and you can see how this complex has been shelled and massive devastation there as a result of this shelling, the area being reduced to dust as a result of the shelling and airstrikes by the Russian army. Now, this is the Velika Dembreka region of Kiev Oblast in northern Ukraine. This comes as the Russian troops have been advancing towards the capital city, Kiev, and this is the suburb that we're talking about here, which is the Velika Dembreka region of Kiev Oblast area in northern Ukraine. Also remember, the suburbs of Kiev have seen massive airstrikes and bombardments by the Russian troops in the past few days as the Russian troops continue to advance towards the capital city. 4 rounds of talks have been held so far between Russia and Ukraine, but nothing has transpired so far. Continuous bombardments being reported from across the country, and this bus stop that has now been shelled by the Russian troops.
Specific consequences. I think what we have conveyed and what was conveyed by our national security advisor in this meeting is that should they provide military or other assistance that of course violates sanctions or supports the war effort, that there will be significant consequences. But in terms of what those specifics look like, we would coordinate with our partners and allies to make that determination. Well, what we're going to be watching closely, of course, is actions. So beyond that, I think as my colleagues just read out for you in a call that we delayed the briefing slightly to make sure you could all participate in, it was an intense 7-hour session reflecting the gravity of the moment. And it was an opportunity to be very clear about what you've heard our national security advisor convey publicly, but more directly about what the consequences would be.
Attacked by the Russian troops. Now, this is a bus stop that has been shelled by the Russian troops as in
the Russia-Ukraine discussion, which is taking place in the Rajya Sabha right now. The opposition has also raised evacuation operations issue in the parliament today. Suyesha, my colleague, is also with us. Suyesha, Ukraine-Russia issue is also being discussed in the parliament today. What do you think are the issues that the opposition is going to corner the government on in the parliament today?
Well, needless to say, Samiksha, and that is very clear that the opposition is now targeting the center over the evacuation of students from Ukraine, because that has been the biggest issue while the Russia-Ukraine war has been on, how to bring students back. And of course, despite all our efforts by the government, several questions that have also been raised and the videos that surfaced, and now the opposition targeting the center on this very point. Let's listen in to what exactly had happened in the upper house over this.
Honorable members, you are all aware of the situation in Ukraine. A large number of Indian students were required to be evacuated in the context of this situation there. This was a very challenging task. The government of India rose to and also the state governments rose to the occasion in evacuating Indian students as well as some students of other nationalities. These efforts are praiseworthy. I have been informed by the Minister of External Affairs that he will be making a statement on the Ukraine situation and also developments with regard to Indian students.
Heard what Vice President M. Venkaiah Naidu had to say on this matter. And well, this is the very issue that has been raised in the parliament by the opposition of the evacuation of students from Ukraine. All our efforts that were put out by the center and the discussion that is ongoing in the Rajya Sabha.
The Russian state media on Sunday released footage of what it said is a column of Russian military heading towards the Ukrainian capital city from the north. The video comes against a backdrop of intense fighting on the outskirts of Kiev, and satellite images showing a build-up and re-maneuvering of the Russian military outside the Ukrainian capital. Elsewhere, the Russian Defense Ministry released footage purportedly showing a military unmanned aerial vehicle conducting operations and airstrikes inflicting damage onto Ukrainian forces. And even as the date and location of the videos remain unverified, concerns over Russia's intensifying offensive against Kiev have only been on a rise. Agency report for Republic TV.
The Operational Coordination Center of the main directorate of the State Emergency Service of Ukraine in Kiev received a report of a fire that had broken out in the Oblon district of the capital. The nearest fire and rescue units arrived at the scene immediately. Upon arrival, the fighters found that the hit of an unknown object caused partial destruction. Cutting across to Samiksha, as we stay with these pictures, Samiksha, we have been witnessing such scenes, and these are pictures once again indicating of residential areas being hit in Kiev.
Well, absolutely, Suyesha. You know, multiple visuals that have been accessed by the public only go on to prove how the Russian troops have been targeting the civilian areas. Another visual on our screens right now that shows the aftermath of the shelling by the Russian troops in Kiev. In fact, that is a residential building that seems to have been hit as a result of airstrikes by the Russian troops. Now, remember, this comes on a day when we are looking at the talks between Russia and Ukraine, which will take place virtually, though, between the delegates of Russia and Ukraine. Now, remember, Zelensky had earlier also pressed on having a direct talks with Vladimir Putin as well, but of course that did not transpire. We are looking at some sort of resolution when it comes to the peace talks that will happen today itself. But in the backdrop of all this, constant shelling and airstrikes continue unabated across Ukraine, and those are the visuals we are getting right now from Kiev region. Now, remember, also this comes as the Russian troops have been advancing towards the Kiev region, so situation there absolutely grim. Suyesha.
And Samiksha, on this point, let me also bring in our guest, Patikrit Payne, who is joining us on the broadcast. Patikrit, important to understand how you're viewing the developments as on date. About 2.5 weeks that the war has been ongoing. And then, of course, we've seen the kind of statements and the changing statements by the leaders. Today, the fourth round of talks is expected between Ukraine and Russia. And then again, we see how US and China are also now playing an important part. Your take, Patikrit.
Are no doubt facing resistance in some of the major cities and especially in Kiev. And note one of the key reasons for that is the kind of arsenal that the NATO countries have actually offered to and given to Ukraine in terms of Stinger missiles and the Javelin missiles. So what the Russians are trying to do right now is very apparent that they're trying to destroy the critical security infrastructures and the critical economic infrastructures of Ukraine and debilitate their ability to run the administration as usual. And it's also apparent that, they're asking for the civilians to evacuate and also, bombing civilian areas, which seems that Russia wants to control these regions, and it's not just about regime change, which initially a lot of people had thought, because there is resistance today. So it's not just about, changing the regime. So far as the talks are concerned, I think Russia will insist on the 3 to 4 key points that they have stated from day one. That is to change the constitution of Ukraine and making it very clear that they will remain neutral and not join NATO. Number 2, recognize the regions like Donbas region, the 2 republics which has been recognized by Russia now, Donetsk and Luhansk, and recognize Crimea as part of Russia, and also, to stop aggression and, fighting on the part of Ukraine as well. So far as the talks, are concerned, I think it's very difficult for Zelensky to actually accede to all these points. Then it becomes a political liability for him to convince his own people as to why he went for the war if he had to, accept those demands. But there are limited choice for Zelensky as well, because he's not getting the kind of support that he had expected from NATO. So far as the talks are concerned between Russia and China, or US and China, America is asking China not to support Russia in any way. Russia has a shortage of critical spare parts, especially in the aviation sector, because Airbus and Boeing have suspended or sanctioned them. They are also probably looking for a lot of combat-related spare parts, and I think they're looking for China to take a lot of their natural resources and the minerals, and especially oil, to help them in some way shore up their economy, which is right now faltering because of the sanctions. We have to see whether China will accede to those points or not, because one simple reason is, so today we see that as of yet the war was limited to Kiev and the eastern part of Ukraine. Now they have started hitting Lutsk and Ivanov, that region, Ivan Frankivsk, in that which are near to NATO countries like Romania, Hungary, or Poland. This means these are the regions from where the supplies were coming from NATO, and Russia is trying to prevent those supplies by hitting those installations. We have to see what happens if they cross the border somehow. Yes. It becomes a NATO versus Russia direct conflict, because these regions are very near to the border. So we are at a critical stage. we might also see
it is a critical stage indeed, Pratikrit, and the very fact that Russia is intensifying the offensive in Ukraine. But where exactly is this headed as far as the fourth round of talks are concerned, considering the first 3 rounds have not really led to some fruitful result? We'll talk more about this, Pratikrit. For the moment, a 1-minute report.
The very place which happens to be one of the key areas, and important to point out, a strategic position as far as Ukrainian army is concerned. This entire area, at least about 6 households that you can